One parameter in our Helix amp models that can have an absolutely huge effect on how our amp model is going to sound and feel is the sag control. Now we have what I've always referred to as the deeper functions down here: sag, hum, ripple, bias, bias X. But the sag control is a real favorite of mine, and it can really change how that particular amp model feels under our fingers, but also the way it sounds. Now, what is the sag going to do? Well, basically, if we have a very low sag setting, it's going to have a much tighter feel to it. Whereas if we have a higher sag setting, the notes are going to feel a little bit maybe squishier, shall I say it? I'll give you some examples in a minute. One thing to keep in mind, the sag setting is going to be much more noticeable when we have the master control higher. It doesn't mean if we have the master lower that we won't feel any difference or hear any difference, but it is going to be a more dramatic effect the higher that we have the master control, since it is kind of working on that power amp section of the amp model. So here's a few settings I have on one of my favorite amp models, the Brit Trim Norm. I have the normal drive crank to 10, the tone stack set as you can see it here, and the master up on 10. And this sounds like this with our sag on its default setting of 5. Great amp model, love the way that sounds. Now let's drag this sag all the way down to 0. Now, you may find that's a subtle difference, and going from 5 to 0 I can feel a difference under my fingers, but here's where we're really going to notice the difference. I'm going to crank this up to 10 now. Now take a listen to this. Let's go between 0. Do you hear the more tight sound to those notes? 10. Almost like the higher sag setting gives us a little bit more of a vintage vibe to it. Now, obviously, I'm going to extremes in this video just to showcase what that control is capable of and how dramatic an effect it can have on our amp model. But you should go and experiment with that and see if you can't tweak any amp models or presets that you have to get them even more in the ballpark of the tone you're after in your head. I hope that was a helpful tip. I hope you enjoy the music on the way out. Links are in the description below to the presets you're about to hear on the way out.